Greetings, this is Jim Lindsay, and this is a tutorial on spreadsheets, their basic skills that you'll need to make spreadsheets. We have an ambitious agenda. Let me show you what we'd like to cover here. These are the things I would like to cover with you. I'll do my best to keep this as brief as possible. The first big question I'd like for you to think about is that. So I'll give you a moment to pause the video and read that, please. Okay, hopefully you paused the video and you read that. You know, this is a business class. CIS 141 is part of the Information Systems program, which is in the Gordon Ford College of Business, and so I think it's one of my responsibilities is to teach you business lessons whenever I can. And the spreadsheeting story, as well as the story about operating systems and a graphical user interface in particular, those two things offer great case studies for business lessons. And so we'll kind of delve into this, and hopefully you're going to enjoy it. First though, let's hit what a spreadsheet is, and then briefly hit its history. And a spreadsheet is basically just the electronic equivalent of a paper ledger. And I think probably as long as we've had anything of value as human beings, there's probably been some form of spreadsheet around. Even back in like old Egypt, like in ancient Egypt, when they had the pyramids, and they were writing on papyrus and stuff like that, they were making inventories and keeping track of how many crops they had, how much livestock they had, how many spices they had, that sort of stuff. Because as a responsible owner and steward of stuff, you need to keep track of what's come in and what's gone out. If you want to be able to pay your debts and collect things that you've loaned to other people, you have to keep track of those things. And so the electronic spreadsheet is just the current manifestation of that sort of document. You probably have a checkbook that you use to write checks from time to time, and I know we don't write checks like we used to. We have debit cards and credit cards now that we do a lot of that with, but even with the few number of checks that you probably still write, you probably have a checkbook ledger. And as you start to work with a spreadsheet, think about it as an electronic version of that checkbook ledger. And there's one pictured right there for you, because I'm pretty confident that you have a checkbook and you're used to keeping track of these sorts of things for your own personal expenses. Now, where did these sorts of things come from? Well, the electronic spreadsheets were created for mainframe computers all the way back in the 1960s, and we credit three people in particular for coming up with that. We have Medicich, Pardo, and Landau that we credit with the creation for those sorts of pieces of software for mainframes. But in the 1970s, in the late 1970s and the early 1980s, personal computers were created, and we've got a picture like of an old Apple computer here. And once those computers were out and people had those computing devices at their disposal, they wanted to have some software which allowed them to do the same sort of electronic ledger work on that kind of machine. Now, who first came up with it? Well, let's learn about that now. Here are two people pictured on the screen in front of you. We have a guy named Dan Bricklin. This is him right here. And this is Bob Frankston right here. And just to keep this story as short as possible, Dan Bricklin was a computer scientist that went back to get a master's degree, and he was in the process of getting a master's of business administration. And part of that coursework involved a lot of case studies. You had to go through and look at companies and see what they did well, what they did poorly, and you had to create a lot of accounting documents as part of that case study. And so, I mean, that's whether you do an MBA now or an MBA 30, 40 years ago, it was still the same thing, because you learn a lot of really good lessons from studying the successes and failures of others. And so unfortunately for Bricklin and all the guys in his, in his class, there wasn't a computer program that could do this sort of thing, and so you had to do all this accounting work manually with a pencil and an eraser. And you can imagine how error prone that process can be, especially when you're tired, if you've been working for a long time, and you make a mistake up at the top of your document. By the time you get to the bottom and realize you've made a mistake, it's like, oh man, I've got to do the whole thing over again. It's very frustrating. And so what Dan Bricklin did, because he was a computer scientist, he knew how to program. He had taken an Apple computer with him to complete his master's work, and so he wrote a calculator program called VisitCalc, and he showed it to his classmates. He said, hey guys, check this out. For when I do my homework now, this is what I used to do my homework. And they all thought, wow, that's awesome, man, that's cool. You should sell that. And so they encouraged him to market and sell that software, and he did. And in that process of making VisitCalc a commercial product, he brought in this guy Bob Frankston right here, who was also a programmer, and they made a really good product. And it was such a good product that it became what's called a killer application or killer app. And this is one of Apple's first killer apps. And what that means is that people wanted that software so badly, they would go out and they would buy an Apple computer just so they could get the software. Because small businesses, mom and pop businesses, didn't have an accounting software option because it only existed on mainframes, right? So this VisitCalc software sold a lot of Apple computers because people wanted it so much. And so these guys did very well. They made a lot of money. And as you can see from this timeline right here, unfortunately, they didn't continue to stay open-minded. As the IBM personal computer came out, they failed to make a version for it. And you'll see as this timeline progresses here, basically from 1981 down through 1987 here, you basically see Excel emerge right here. But and also it's interesting that Excel was made for Apple's first and then for Windows. But basically the guys at VisitCalc, because of a number of different things, they basically didn't make a version that worked on the IBM personal computers. And the IBMs were by far much more successful commercially than the Apple computers. And you guys have a hard time seeing that if you're a young student, because you see iMacs and you see MacBooks and MacBook Airs and you see the iPhones and iPods and you think, man, Apple's everywhere. And today they are. They've been able to gain a lot of market share, but there was a whole period especially when the IBM PCs came out, where IBM just eclipsed Apple, and Apple became like a really small little niche of the whole personal computer world. And so the fact that VisitCalc didn't make a version to work on those IBM PCs was a huge detriment to them. In fact, one of the guys that did, this guy that made Lotus 123, that was the software I was using at Fruit of the Loom when I was working over there for our spreadsheeting. That's like my first job out of college. This guy was able to make enough money. Basically, he bought and closed VisitCalc because at that point it was public. He was able to get enough shares he could shut down the competition. And so that's where this lesson comes in. These guys were really brilliant. They came up with a great product. They got it marketed. They got it out there in the marketplace, but they failed to see this opportunity, the whole IBM PC opportunity, and because they didn't pursue it, they opened themselves up to this huge threat from people like Lotus 123 that were competing in that bigger market share. And so that's your business lesson from this, and hopefully if you go into business, you can kind of keep these sorts of things in mind. And what I encourage you to do is try and surround yourself with people that have different skill sets than you. And I think that's one of the weaknesses for Bricklin. And Bricklin had Bob Frankston around and probably a bunch of other really great computer scientists that were coming up with these awesome spreadsheeting tools, but their business skills were just not as good. They weren't as savvy as their competitors. And so try and surround yourself with people that are really skilled at things that you're not skilled at, and maybe you can help each other see things that the other people are missing. So that's my suggestion to you. So as we continue, we next look at, what is a spreadsheet used for? What's its purpose? And well, basically, a spreadsheet is, something that allows you to, like we mentioned earlier, add up numbers and do all sorts of arithmetic very quickly in a very automated way. Computers can do things like this faster than we can as humans, more accurately than we can, and they never get tired. And so by having a computer do this sort of work for us, we can take things like data. Let's say you're a teacher and you have a bunch of test scores. You want to figure out, hey, what was the average score of our class? Well, if you look at this is that same graphic right there. To figure out the class average for that, you'd have to add up all those different people for Jim and Tom and Ann and Jill and so on. Say, hey, we have a total of so many, and we have to divide it by the total number taking the test, and our test average is 48.5. Well, what if you realize, oh wow, Homer and Bart are in our class, and this is supposed to be Bart and Homer Simpson. What if you realize that Homer and Bart cheated together? So you've got to give them zeros for the test. Well, when you go back and put those in there, you have to recalculate the total, the average. Well, again, you'd have to add it all up, divide by the total number to come up with your new number, your new average. And wouldn't it be nice if you could just have that all completely automated? So all you had to do is just type in the scores and it automatically calculated what the average was for you. So you just have to, in the initial building of the workbook and the worksheets, you come up with the structure, and then everything else is just automatically bam, 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 populating for you. And that's what I want you guys to learn how to do. In addition to doing these sorts of calculations, we can also do cool stuff like charting. And this is just basically a chart that shows this data right over here for the east, west, and north for these particular quarters. And we're going to learn all about that in our. You'll learn about that during these boot camp lessons here, as well as in your SAM projects. Okay, well, let's take a quick look at the environment. This environment, it doesn't take long, but I want to make sure you're familiar with what things are called in Excel. And so the entire file, when you create an Excel file, the thing is called a workbook. And when you try and save it, if you just try to save it without putting your own name, it's going to call it book 1 or book 2 or book 3. You can see that up here at the top of this picture here. And the way that you can remember that Excel files are called workbooks is, think about, again, this is the electronic version of a paper ledger, right? If you had a bunch of pages all stuck together, that would be a book. And the individual pages would be the sheets that make up the book, right? Well, these individual tabs down here are the worksheets that make up this workbook. So the entire file is the workbook. The individual tabs that you can, create and organize and do all sorts of things too are called worksheets. We have columns. You'll see like the A, B, C, D, E, F here. These are columns. And we also have rows, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and down to the very bottom. These are called rows, and so we have rows here, which are basically the horizontal items you see here. And the intersection of a column and a row is called a cell, just like a jail cell, C-E-L-L. We refer to that cell basically by the column and then the row. So in this case, we're in the very upper leftmost cell, and so we refer to that as A1. Up here at the top, you have the ribbon, which you guys are used to working with through PowerPoint and through Microsoft Word. You have these different tabs of the ribbon, and then there are all sorts of different buttons and commands that you can access from the different tabs of the ribbon. So this is the environment that you're going to be working in. Okay, in my class, there's only one keystroke that I want you to memorize, and that's basically F1. Because if you're working with a Windows program, basically when you hit F1, it's going to bring up help. And if you're a normal human being, when you learn about the specifics of especially spreadsheets, about 15 minutes after the class or 15 minutes after the lesson, you're going to be like, well, how did I do that? I don't remember exactly how I did that. That's really normal, because this is, of all the applications you learn about in this class, this is probably the most technical. This is probably one of the most useful, but it's also one of the most complex. And so the details of exactly how you do stuff, you'll forget it. And so remembering F1, remembering how to get help is going to be really helpful. When you hit F1, and F1 is basically up at the top of your keyboard. If you look at your keyboard, they're called function keys. There's usually 12 function keys on your keyboard, and F1 is usually in the upper left corner, up towards like your escape key. So you hit F1, brings up the help menu. It looks like this. It's web-based, it's HTML-based, and you can type in here, how do I do a pivot table? How do I do this? How do I sort data? How do I do a chart? Hit the search, and it'll bring up hits for you, which you click on just like on web pages, and you can find information. You can also Google stuff. You can also YouTube stuff. There are YouTube videos for just about anything you want to do in Excel, and just about any specific version of Excel. So let's say you had like Excel 2010 and you're trying to do a pivot table. You can look on YouTube and you're going to find a video that shows you how to do that. So very easy to find help for Excel. Make sure you remember that F1 is the way to turn on or invoke the help system from within the application itself. Now, there are several best practices I'd like for you to come away with as a result of this boot camp, and that's basically I want you to know what documentation, assumptions, and formulas are. You can pause this. You can pause this video, and I'll go ahead and just encourage you to do that now. Pause this video and read over these definitions right now. Okay, hopefully you did that. You'll learn about documentation and assumptions once we get to the hands-on portion at the end of this presentation. And but now let's talk about formulas, because basically what I hope you'll remember forever from this class is always use the formula if you can. And this is one of those rare instances when you can say always, but always use a formula if you can, because when you use formulas, you basically are building a smarter workbook, and as a result of that, it's going to update itself, and it's going to be more accurate, and it's going to save you a lot of time and energy and sanity, because you're not going to have to go back and correct mistakes, because it's automatically going to be updating because you used a formula as opposed to just typing in specific values. And so you'll see exactly what that means once we get into the hands-on part, and we start to make our grade calculator here in just a little bit. But really want that to harp on that. Use a formula. What does a formula look like? Well, here's an automated slide for you, and you have values in A1 and A2, and the values are 10 and 20 in cells A1 and A2, and you'll see that they're being typed into A1 and A2 there. When you get down to A3, a formula is being used to add those up. You could have just as easily typed in 30 if you wanted to total those up, but what's smart about using a formula, and you'll see that the formula, it always starts with the equal sign. So in that case, down in A3, what the person typed is equals A1 plus A2. What's smart about doing that is that if somebody comes back a little bit later and they change the value in A1 to let's say the number 40, well, down in A3 it's going to automatically jump to the correct total, which in that case would be 60 as opposed to 30. Use the formula as often as you possibly can. And again, this is another one of those instances where you can use always. Formulas always begin with the equal sign. So if you look at a spreadsheet and you're in a cell and it begins with the equal sign, you're working with a formula. And that tells you that it's adding something up or dividing something or doing some sort of arithmetic. So formulas always begin with that equal sign. Now, this will kind of remind you of math class. When you were in math and you wanted to do things like multiplication or division or addition or subtraction, there were certain mathematical operators, right? Well, when you're using a spreadsheet, you also have mathematical operators you have to use, and most of those make sense, like addition is the plus sign and subtraction is the minus sign. But some of those don't necessarily make so much sense, like exponents are the caret sign. And if you look on your keyboard, where is the caret sign? You may have to look around for it. But as you look for it, it's going to be basically the uppercase 6 on my keyboard, and probably the same on yours. But if you want to use an exponent, that's how you get that into the spreadsheet. Division is the /, which is the lowercase part of question mark. We're used to using question marks a lot, but that / is how you get division going. Multiplication is an asterisk, which is the uppercase of 8. And so knowing these mathematical operators is really important if you're going to be creating formulas, which is something I want you to be doing, right? And also something important to know is if you're going to have multiple operations going on, you can control the order of those operations with parentheses. And so if you want one operation to take place before another, you put it in parentheses, and then that's going to take place before the stuff that's outside of it takes place. And so I'm sure you remember the order of operations from your math classes in high school and college math, but that's how you can control that stuff. You basically use your parentheses, and then you've got your list of mathematical operators right there. Okay, so let's look at some formulas. Formulas look like this. They can be as simple as just if you're referring to the contents of a cell, like you wouldn't put equals A1 inside of A1. Where this would be used is, let's say some other place on a worksheet you want to refer to whatever value is in A1, you just could put equals A1. And so that's like a simple, very, very simple example of a formula. It's echoing the contents of another cell. These guys down here are just addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division of A1 and A2. You also have some functions, and functions are pre-built formulas. Ones that you'll use all the time are like the summing function and the average function and the minimum function and so on. But when you work with a function, you're typically going to throw in what we call a range right here, and we'll talk about ranges in just a minute. But what this would do, it would add up, it would sum everything from A1 to A10. It would average everything from A1 to A10. And the rules, the grammar rules or the syntax that you see right there, you'll learn how to do that as you go through this lesson. As you go through the SAM lessons, you'll learn that syntax. And again, if you forget, you can always click on what button on your keyboard to pull up help, and then the class said F1. You bring up your help through F1, right? So these are what some formulas would look like. Okay, let's hit one or two other ideas before we get to actually doing this. Let's talk about cell references. And a cell reference can be absolute or relative, and by what Excel's normal behavior is basically to do things relatively, or use a relative address. And as you can see from these examples on the screen here, mentioned this one already, but if you wanted to refer to the contents in cell A1, you could be equals A1, and then that's what that would look like. You can also refer to things on different sheets. You'll recall it when I talked to you about the environment. You can have a workbook, and then there are multiple sheets within the workbook, right? Well, what this cell reference right here says is basically we want the contents of A1 from sheet 2. So this would be on sheet 1 or sheet 3 or sheet 4 or sheet 500 within a workbook, but it's specifically calling the contents of that cell from that particular worksheet. So you always have that ability. And you can expand that further. You can actually reach out to a specific file. And so this is going for cell A1 on sheet 2 in a particular file stored on that drive. And so will you get into this right away? No, but just what I'm really wanting to do is plant seeds here in your brain, and so later on when you need to figure out how to reference something in a different file, this is how you do it. I mentioned a moment ago absolute versus relative cell addresses. When we're talking about cell references, so I'm going to bring this up. A relative cell address and an absolute cell address reference. For right now, if you just remember that a relative cell address basically looks like that, and an absolute cell reference includes dollar signs in front of either the column or the row, that would be great. You'll learn about why this matters in the hands-on part when we get to it, but basically these dollar signs have nothing to do with money. But $A, $1, what that's doing, it's creating something called an absolute reference, and as we copy anything with this reference in it around our workbook, that's going to stay anchored, and you'll see that when we get to the hands-on part. Okay, last 2 points to basically to overwhelm you. Let's talk about cell ranges and then cell data types. Then we'll actually do this stuff. We'll actually work with it. We'll build it. We're going to build a grade calculator. All right, so a range, I've alluded to a range already, but a range is when you have a start and an end of cells that you want to refer to. So in this case, like as you see at this top example right here, everything from A1 to A10, everything including those two cells is included. So you could sum that, you could average that, you could look for the minimum in that, you could look for the maximum, but that's called a cell range because it goes from A1, you've got the colon in between, to the ending. So from the start, colon, to the end. That's the syntax. That's how you understand what that means. If you want to have a range of cells that aren't necessarily right next to each other, you can still do that, and you'll see in this case down here we have everything from A1 through A5, and we skip A6 and we go to A7, we skip A8 and we go to A9. So these commas let us know that, okay, we're going to go to another cell. So you could have like A1 colon A5 comma, then A7 comma A9 comma A11 to A19 and colon A19. I mean, it's you have the freedom to construct ranges as you need, and if you see commas in here, it's basically breaking up the different components within that range, and they don't have to be adjacent to one another, but they can be. And so if you see that colon in between two different start and end point, that means that those are adjacent cells, and these guys right here are not adjacent. So here's a list of our next and last point, and that's data types. And as you put stuff into a spreadsheet, you can put in text or numbers, and the numbers can be of varying types. You could be things from like currency, like money, or as you see right there, like percents or times or dates. And so the program's pretty smart, and when you identify a cell or a column or a range as a date, as you type stuff in there, it's going to format it accordingly. And so that's pretty cool. So when does this come into play? Well, basically this comes into play like once you've built your spreadsheet, and especially if you're trying to share the information in it with other people, you want to format that spreadsheet so it's as readable as possible. And so knowing what sort of data types are there, or that you have available, helps you format it so it's as readable as possible. So knowing that there is a just straight numeric type versus a percent, that can be really helpful, because if you're trying to get percents on the screen, well, format it as a percent, and then as people look at that spreadsheet, they're going to automatically know, oh, that's a percent. And you, especially if you're going to, one of the examples I want to show you in another lesson is where we're trying to basically apply for a loan. And if we're trying to show the banker or the loan officer at the bank, our financial information, if we can make ourselves look as good as possible, that's going to help us get that loan. And so formatting things can take you a long way towards that, making that positive impression. And to format things properly, you have to know your data types. And so that's our last point. Here's a list of sources. If you'd like to check out any of the stuff that I talked about in this presentation, here are several different places that I used to create this presentation. And there is a summary of what we've talked about. But now what we want to do, we want to actually go over to Excel and build a spreadsheet, a grade calculator, because that grade calculator includes all of these different things that we've just been talking about. Okay, on the screen in front of you is the Blackboard site, and I'm doing this in the summer of 2015. So if I use this in the fall or spring of 16, don't freak out if you see this and it looks different than your Blackboard site, but because the content will still be useful. But what you see here when you look at this is basically you're watching that, so you're watching that video, and those PowerPoint slides I used a moment ago are available right there, so you can reference those as you want to. But there is a Word document and an Excel file that you can download, and they look like this. The Word document is this Part 1 project, and basically it describes, hey, we're going to build a grade calculator, and here's the scenario. There are assignments, there's a midterm, there's a final, there's a research paper. Each of those has a value, and the final grade for that fictitious course here is going to be 100 points. And then it talks about documentation assumptions. Those are the things that the formulas, those things we mentioned in the video a second ago. And there's a little screenshot down here what the final thing would look like. Now, what we want to do now is we want to build this. And so, in addition to providing you with some information about how you would construct this, I've also provided you with the actual solution file, and that solution file looks like this. Let me pull it up. It's this part1 solution.xlsx. And so as you look at this, you can go through here and you can see that these are values that have been typed. But like once you get to here, these are all formulas, and they include things like absolute and relative formulas, cell references. We have like merged cells. We have different formatting in place here, fill colors, blah blah blah. This is the solution. So what I'd encourage you to do is, as you work on this this project here, and it's not something you do for a grade. What you do is as I go through and I make this in just a moment, I want you to do it too. I want you to do it almost like a SAM project where I talk about something, pause it, go and do it, and you're going to learn about documentation, assumptions, and in these formulas, especially the absolute versus relative. And you can refer to that. You can refer to that solution file if you get behind it all. This is just like a sport. I mean, if you want to be good at making spreadsheets, you need to do it. And just like if you want to be good at free throws in basketball, the way that you get good at that is you take the basketball and you go out in the driveway and you just shoot free throw after free throw after free throw, and you just do it. And so this is kind of your introduction here to using spreadsheets. So I want you to try and build this. So let's get started. How do we make something in Excel? Well, you have to start Excel. If you're using a Windows 7 computer, like if you're at Western's Computer Lab, there'd be a little start button down there. You click on that, go to like Office 2013, and then select Excel 2013. I'm using Windows 8, and so I'm going to click on here and go to where all the applications are. If you're not using Windows 8.1, then you're going to see something totally different. That's fine. But I want to start Excel. Come over here to the Microsoft Office stuff. There's Excel. Start it up. And it's going to open up with my file. Let me go ahead and just close it so I can start that from scratch. So again, I'm going to start it up. And it looks like this. And this environment is what we described earlier as the, basically you have the workbook, and currently there's one worksheet within this workbook. This up here is the ribbon with the tabs on it. You have the columns and you have the rows. You can zoom if you want to make it so it's easier to see. You can zoom in here with a zoom button right down there, and I'll zoom in a little bit. But basically what we want to start with is this whole idea of assumptions. And so when you look at the example I gave you, like in that Word document right there, this little screenshot, there's a saying, hey, this is a grade calculator and this was modified by Jim Lindsay on so-and-so date. And the way that you get text like that into a spreadsheet is really simple. You just start typing. So I'm in cell A1. Again, that's because it's column A, row 1, and I just type. So this is a grade calculator, and you just type. And so I'm going to put my name is Jim Lindsay, and you could type like the whole thing, like this was modified by so and so on a certain date. This is documentation, and the reason that you include documentation in a spreadsheet is because this is the same reason that you would include documentation in any kind of program that you would write. Hopefully you're going to excel and get promoted at your job, and somebody else is going to have to take over your work, right? And so that being the case, if you've included notes about your spreadsheet or your program, whoever assumes this for you is going to be able to do it easier and faster than if you don't leave any notes. It's just an explanation. And because we have multiple worksheets we can put here, like we click this and make like a worksheet 2, worksheet 3. We might have one whole worksheet that's just called documentation. If you right click down in here, you can do things like rename, and you could call this like the documentation worksheet. So everything in here could be just documentation. You could jump over here to sheet 2 and then do all your figuring and your arithmetic over here, all your data over here. So, and note that you can take these sheets, you can also like rearrange these. I'm going to drag 2 and put it in front of documentation. I'll take documentation and put it behind 3. And so these worksheets that make up the workbook can be named, they can be rearranged however you want to do them. I'll pull that guy and put him back out in front and just rename that as Jim, just to make it easy. But that is documentation. These are the worksheet names down here, and the whole reason we want to put documentation in our files is because it helps other people use this file later and know how to best use it. Okay, the next part of this little project, this grade calculator, is that it says, hey, we want to put in some assumptions up here, and what these are, we're just going to type this stuff in. We're just going to straight up type these values, these words and these values into the worksheet here in just a moment. And the reason we want to type these in is because these are basically variables that we're going to use in formulas down here, and we're going to use them more than one time. And since we know we're going to use these variables more than one time, we can put them in one spot right here, and then when it comes to our formula, we can just refer back to that and refer back to that and refer back to that. And it saves us time in making our formulas, and it also makes it so that if we want to do any changes, we can just make the change in one spot, and then it shows up everywhere else all at once. I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. Okay, I've opened up the solution file here. Let me zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. But let's say I'm the teacher and I say, hey, you know what, these assignments were really difficult. Instead of just being worth 4 points, those should really be worth 8 points. If I put in an 8 here and I hit enter, I haven't done it yet, but when I hit enter in just a minute, watch these values right here. Watch how these jump. If I hit enter, boom, all that stuff changed for me. And the reason it worked, go back here, I'm going to make this into 4 again, hit enter. The reason all of those numbers jumped for me was because I used this as an assumption area. All the formulas in here, down in these cells, like in C 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, they're all referring back to this cell right here, B5. And because I've centralized that, made that one place, it makes it so I can just make a change in one spot and everything else will cascade or do update for me, and I don't have to go make 6 changes. I just can make one change and all 6 of those will update accordingly. So that's the value of an assumption. Now let me go ahead and jump back to that initial sheet here. Let me go to here, and how do we get that onto the worksheet? Well, you just type it in here, assumptions, type that in there, and then the the points for those assumptions. Now let me point something out here. When you type this, you'll see, ooh, assumption just got covered up by points. Why? Well, the reason it got covered up is because the word assumption is longer than will fit in this column. If I took points away, if I got rid of that, you'll see that assumption shows back up. To make that fit, let me put points back in here. To make that fit, all you have to do is make A wider. And you could do that a number of ways. If you get the pointer in between A and B, you'll see how it goes from like a down arrow to like this little weird thing. If you just left click right there, you can then drag. You drag it, make it a specific width. Or if you just double click, once it looks like that, it'll automatically go to the width of the widest thing in it. So that's a little bit more than I need. I'm going to come back to about there and put my values in here. So I have the Word document right here, basically assignments, midterm, final exam, research paper. I'll type these guys and put those in there. I'll pause that while I do it, but you know, it's just a matter of just typing right here is all you're doing, and so then you're putting in these values right here. So I'll pause it and type these in. You do the same thing on your end. Okay, I'm back. I typed my stuff in. Research paper is a little bit wider than it's going to fit, so I'm going to make that a little bit wider again. Ta-da, there you go. In the formatting that you see in this Word document, you'll see that like assumptions and values have a yellow background, and that's done through something called a fill color. And you'll also see that there are borders around all these cells right here. How is that accomplished? Well, very easily. Let's first do the borders. I'm going to go to, make sure my home tab is selected right there. I'm going to go select those cells. I just left, I'm going to, with the pointer basically in A4, I'm going to hold down the left mouse button, select those cells, and under the font area on the home tab, you've got this little thing for borders. If you click on that, you can go to all borders. So there's all the borders. And because I want the yellow background as the fill color for these guys, you'll see in this font area there's also this little bucket for the fill color, and you can select a fill color, and I'll go with yellow because it's really easy to see. Also, I believe these guys were centered. If I want to make all the stuff in this column, like in these 5 cells centered up with that stuff selected. Again, the way I did that, just hold down my left mouse button, select those guys. Under the alignment area on the home tab of the ribbon, you've got like these different centering items, and so I've made those formatted where they're in the middle. And so that's just some simple formatting. And again, this is just straight typing those numbers in, typing those numbers in, typing those words in, and that's all that is involved with creating that. Okay, next we want to get this this next chunk of the spreadsheet made, this part for the assignments, and this has some pretty cool stuff in here. You get to start seeing the intelligence of some Excel features here. So we need like events, your score, your points, and so if I'm going to get events, your score, your points typed into the worksheet over here. So I'm going to come down here, events. These are basically the things a student would do in this class. Your score is going to be, you know, whatever. Hold on, kind of freaked out there. I mistyped something there. So your score and then your points, and what these labels mean, what's going to go underneath these is basically, and I'm just making these wider the same way that I did a second ago. This is going to be like, you know, whether it was an assignment, whether it's a midterm, whether it's a final exam, that's what the person actually scored on it, and then here's the resulting number of points they got that's going to go towards their final grade. So that's what those labels mean. Now, the first batch of things we're trying to keep track of are assignments. We have assignment 1 through 6, and this is the instruction file we're looking at. And if you look at the details of the instructions up here, it tells you, say, hey, each assignment, there are 6 of them, has a point value of 4 points. The lowest one's going to be dropped, and note that there are like 20 questions on each assignment. So basically, let's say it's a math class, and you know there's like 20 questions per assignment. Okay, so if you got 20 out of 20, that means you got 100%, and that means that you get like 4 points total, right? If you only got 10 out of 20 points, or you know half of the questions right on the assignment, then you'd only get 2 points, because that's 50% of 4 is 2 points, right? So that's what we're trying to make down here. So in the spreadsheet, I'm going to have assignment. Type the word assignment. And I'm just going to assignment 1. And I hit the enter key. Now, here's where the cool part comes in. Let me scroll down here just a little bit. Because Excel is kind of somewhat intelligent, if I get to the lower right corner of this cell, note how my pointer goes from a big plus sign to a little plus sign. Once it's a little plus sign, if I hold down my left mouse button and come on down here, it's going to say, hey, you're wanting to fill those, and it filled it with assignment 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for me. I'm going to undo that, Control Z. I could have also typed assignment 2, assignment 3, assignment 4, assignment 5, and assignment 6, but it's a lot faster to just get to the lower right corner, let that big plus become a little plus, left mouse click, and then scroll on down here. Let that fill that in. That's basically called filling versus copying. And this little smart tag you see right here, if you click on that, you can either copy, which would be like assignment 1 actually, and if I go to copy, it puts assignment 1 in all of those. If I want to fill, it knows it's going to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It takes the numbers and increases those for me. So that's pretty cool. These scores right here, these are just numbers that you would type in. And this over here is where we're going to get to our first formulas. So let me go ahead and get the scores typed in there. I think we're looking at 12, 15, 7, 18, 20, and 14. I'll type those in. I'll see you in just a moment. Okay, so I typed those guys in. Next, I'll just do some formatting real quickly to make this easier to read. Select those guys right there. Do that whole all border so you guys can see that real easily. And then make these guys at the top, give them that yellow fill color. What I did, I just selected those 3 cells. I'm going to click on this fill color right here. Give them that yellow fill color, and I'll take these guys right here. And you can do that a number of ways. You could use your left mouse button and select those cells all at once, or you could just click on one, like upper left corner, and use your shift and arrow keys to select those guys. But I'm going to center those up like that so everything is nice and pretty to look at. And now what I'll do is I'll now work on the formulas here, because I want to make a formula that's going to calculate the number of points that the student earned when they got 12 out of 20 on that first assignment right there. Okay, let's make this a little bit easier. I'm going to make it 20. Let's say you got to score 20 on the first one, okay? Because there are 20 questions per assignment, right? So if you're trying to figure out what is the percent score of your work there, what would it be? Well, it'd be 20 divided by 20, right? And so that's going to be 1. And then you take that and you multiply it times your points possible, and that's going to give you your points that you earned. So we're going to put that mathematic formula right here, that arithmetic right here. So to make that happen, I want to call on your memory banks here. All formulas begin with what character? And the answer, of course, is equal sign, right? So I'm going to hit equals. So equals. And then at that point, what I can do, I'm going to take this guy, and again, always use a formula versus just typing stuff in. But I'm going to take that cell, we want to take the value of that cell and divide it by 20, because that's the total number of questions per assignment. And that's going to give you, if we just did it like that, that would tell you that, okay, well, you got 100%, you know, if that was 15 right there, so you got 75%, or if you got like 10, you got 50%, right? So that's working. What I want to do now is I want to take that percent that he got and multiply it times the points he got. I'm sorry, the total possible points. So to make that happen, anytime you have a cell and you want to modify its contents, if you're in that cell, you can click up here in the address bar and start typing again. Or if you're in it right there, you can just hit F2. It basically takes you back up in there again, right? And so I'm going to say, now I'm going to just multiply that, which is the asterisk sign, it's the uppercase 8, times the points you get for that. And what that tells you is that, okay, you got 50% of 4. Let me make that back to 20 again. So if you got like 100%, you're going to get it 4 points. If you got 15 out of 20, you're going to get 3 points, right? And so That's why we're using the formula. We take whatever that score is divided by 20 and multiply it times that value up here, 4 points. All of these are assignments, so they're all worth 4 points, and so we use the same exact formula for each one of these. Now, wouldn't it be great if we could just copy this formula like we did a second ago, copy it down this list here, and have it calculate our stuff for us like it's supposed to? Yes, it'd be great. It would save us time. So if we try that, if we go up to this lower right corner here, and we get the big plus to the little plus sign, and then we hold down the left mouse button and we copy, it does copy our formula. You'll see that if we look up here in this box up here, we're going from B11 divided by 20 times B5 to B12 divided by 20 times B6. And you'll notice what's happening is Excel is smart. It knows that when we made this copy, we went down a row. And so it modified 11 into 12, down to 13, and so on. It also took our B5 and made our B5 a B6, a B7, a B8. And the problem with this copying like this is that these guys are assignments, and they need to be anchored to this assignment box right here. This other stuff like the B11, B12, B13, and B14, those are changing, and they should change because each one of these different assignments here, assignment 2, 3, 4, and 5, those should change, but the values should stay the same. And that's where this whole idea of an absolute address or absolute cell reference comes into play. So what I'm going to do back here in C11, I'm just going to modify this formula a little bit. I'm going to click up in here, and I'm just going to change the B5 to a $B $5, and that's called an absolute reference. And so it doesn't change the result in this guy, but now watch what happens if I copy that now. I'm going to go to the lower right corner, hit the big plus to a little plus, left click and drag that down. You'll see that these guys all, as I made that copy, the B11 becomes a B12, B13, B14, B15, B16 like they're supposed to, but the B5 stays the same, and the B5 is pointing back here to the assignment value. And so pretty cool. The B11 is a relative address, and the B5 is an absolute address, and that's the difference. When you copy those around a worksheet, your relative addresses are going to adjust, and your absolutes are not going to adjust. And so that's the beauty of a relative versus an absolute address cell reference when you're copying things. So cool. So now we have this top part of the worksheet done. If we go back to the instructions, you'll see we got all the assignment stuff done right here. Now we have to figure out what the worst score is and then the total points assigned. We'll do that real quickly. So back here in the spreadsheet, the way that we find the worst score is basically we need to look at this range right here, and this range is basically from C11 down to C16. Within this range right here, what is the lowest score? What's the worst one in there? And it's going to be this. Right now, it's this assignment 3. So we need to drop that dude out when we're trying to factor up our points, right, or add up our points. And so we're going to do that in this C17 with something called the minimum function, and the function is a pre-built formula. And so let's type that in. Basically, what you do is it's a formula. A function is a pre-built formula, right? And all formulas begin with what character? They always begin with the equal sign. And so I hit the equal sign, and then you start to type the name of the function you want. In this case, it's the minimum function. I'm just going to type in MIN, and it says, hey, there's a bunch of different options here. We want just the minimum. These are different variations of the minimum or other ones that kind of have the same start. But with this one, because it's the one I want, I'm just going to select it here. And it says, okay, this returns the smallest number in a set. And so then I have to tell it what is the range to look at. So I use parentheses, and I have to tell it which numbers or what cells to look at. And because these are adjacent cells, all I have to do is just left click and select those guys. I also could have typed C11 colon C16, but what I did, I just left clicked and dragged to there, put a closing parentheses, and there it is. So the minimum of C11 to C16, it tells me that's going to be that value. Now watch what happens. If I made this one a 0, it automatically recognizes, oh, now the lowest one is 0. Let's say I make that one a 16, and I come down here, and this one is 14, and this becomes a 12. This can automatically sense whichever one is the minimum, because it's using this minimum function for that particular range. And so that's how I got that value right there. Now I need to get my label over here. So what we're going to do, we're going to take these two cells and merge them and center them, because when you look at the directions right here, it's the worst score and the total assignment points earned. And I wanted to get you working with merge and center in this exercise. So to make that happen, you just take the two cells you want to fuse together, basically take two cells and squish them together. And then there's a button up here to center, merge and center. When you click on that, it takes those two cells and makes them one. So this is the worst assignment score, and treats that as a single cell. Same thing, I'm going to take those two cells, merge and center those, make that so the total assignment points, and again, to get the whole border around things, I'm selecting those 4 chunks now, those 4 cells now, go to the all borders right there. And now what I need to do, I want to get you working with another function, the summing function. And so we're going to use the summing function, and we're going to add up this range of stuff, and then we're going to subtract that guy. And the reason we want to subtract this guy is that we add up all of our points from all of our assignments, and we subtract out the worst one, and that's the total number of points we're going to count. So how does the summing function work? Well, the summing function works like this. All formulas begin with the equal sign, so equals the sum, and we have to tell it what to add up. I take these guys right here, I'm just going to left click and drag those guys right there, and I could have typed that in as well, that also would have worked, but I want to sum this range C11 to C16. I'm going to close that parentheses, and that's the total of those points right there. But now what I need to do, and now I need to subtract that worst score. And the way I can do that, to modify this formula, I can just click up here, or if I'm in that cell, I can hit the F2 button and then be typing in here. I'm going to use the minus sign, and I'm just going to click on this cell right here. So basically that formula right there is going to tell me what the it's going to give me my total number of points, subtracting the worst one. So let's say we had a 0 on one right here. It identifies the 0, and then it adds everything up and subtracts out the 0 score. So pretty cool. Again, there's that formula right there. You have the solution file, so you can see how that was done. And to make this one look exactly like formatting wise like these guys, another thing you have at your disposal is this thing called the format painter. This is a little button. You click on go to the formula, or go to the cell that has the formatting you want to copy, and you just click on the format painter, and then click on the other cell that you want to copy that formatting to, and it copies it for you. So that's neat. And then the last bit of this, basically the midterm final exam or research paper, I'm not going to type those in because you have the solution file, but basically those work exactly like these guys up here did. The student would type in their score on that event, and then over here in the points earned, you would divide whatever you got by total possible points and multiply it times the point value. And so that's how you figure those, and you've got the solution file to figure that out. But this is just repetition at this point of what we did with the assignments over here. Do the same thing there. You're just multiplying times the appropriate box, in this case midterm, final, or research paper, and then you add things up. For your total points earned, you would add up the total points earned. I'll go to the solution file right here. You'll see the solution file is going to add up 18, 19, 20, and 21. That's where your total points come from for the total grade. So and there's the way that the midterm, final exam, and the research paper were figured out. So let me know if you have any questions, but that is the process to create this grade calculator. And now, armed with this information, basically what you could do, you could go out and you could make a spreadsheet to figure out your grades for this class. And in fact, that's what I do. At the end of the semester, I download all of your grades from Blackboard, and then I figure them out with Excel. I don't use Blackboard to figure a grade. Blackboard just serves as a storage place, a repository for all of that data until the end of the semester when I need it to actually calculate your grades. Let me show you one other formula in here just for the heck of it. I'm going to insert a row right here. I'm between 17 and 18. I'm going to insert a row, and I'm going to take these two cells and just merge and center those. Call this the next worst score, or the second worst score. And there's a function called the small function. I use this one all the time because I use a drop and replace policy with your all's grades. And the way that this one works is called equals SMALL, and then you have to give it a range. And basically you tell it, say, I want to look at the scores between C11 and C16. That's the array. That's what I'm looking at. And then I put a comma, and I have to tell it which item within that range are you looking for. I'm looking for the second worst score. Hit that right there. And what it tells me is that, okay, so as it looks at these four cells there, 0 is the worst one, but 2.4 is the second worst one. And so, like when you if you want to build a grade calculator for yourself, calculate your worst regular test score using min, calculate your score you're going to replace it with this small function right here, and then use if-then to basically, and you'll see that in another video, use the if-then function to replace this value with that value. So pretty cool. We covered a lot. In this class, a lot of the times it feels like you're drinking out of a fire hose. And certainly the case here. You've covered a lot of information. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully it's been helpful to you. And I think with all this covered, you're going to be really well poised to tackle those SAM projects and do very well on them. But thanks for your time and attention.